Hello, it's me, Kyle. This is Give Pause Hobby, the channel where I stop to appreciate the things I love to fill my free time with. Today, we are starting a new video series. I know, it's the main export of this channel is new initiatives. But I'm not abandoning the old one. I'm coming back to this, what's all this about, because I'm really enjoying that. But I'm also getting the teacher itch. I want to provide some sort of guidance on how to play a certain aspect or certain games or whatever it may be. And it was kind of staring me in the face in a couple of ways because I have some things in the works. I was like, you know what? Instead of just like mushing together a teach and a playthrough or whatever like that, why don't I just kind of codify this idea that I'm sometimes going to just teach solo stuff. So with that, we're starting Solo Section, the video series where I'm going to go through rule books and specifically call out the like little sections sometimes, or big, depending on the game, that, is all about playing alone. Or sometimes playing alone dovetails into adding like an automa or something to your otherwise meatbag tables. So you can make a 2-player game into 3 or a 3-player game into 4. But primarily, it's going to be focused on solo mode. So for the first episode of Solo Section, I'm going to be showing off one of the games that I have been really enjoying playing solo again. Still, I've never not enjoyed it. I've played many games of this, and this one is Marvel United. I'm holding up the X-Men rulebook because that's the most recent one, but I also have this rulebook here, and then all of the other expansions that I have, and we'll get to that in a second. So let's dive into it. In the back of both of the core game rulebooks, so the X-Men and the original, there is a section that they originally referred to as the S.H.I.E.L.D. solo mode, and then it's referred to as Xavier solo mode, Xavier. And they are the same. They are somewhat confusingly known as different things, but they work the same way as each other. The only difference is that the Xavier solo mode I think has like built-in, FAQ stuff that are in the special rules. It's just like a half-page column in the original game, and it's a full-page column in the X-Men one. And it's just because there's a little bit more clarification, which is helpful. Hang on, let me go put some stuff on. Something else. Okay, I'm back. I was balancing too many rule books on my lap, which was not a tenable situation. Okay, so they work the exact same way. The beginning it says, Marvel United may also be played as single player. In this special mode, you act as Xavier or S.H.I.E.L.D., coordinating the efforts of multiple heroes at once. Solo mode uses all the same rules as the regular game except the following exceptions. Now, what I'm going to do, I am going to be reading off of the X-Men, because this is the most recent. As far as I can tell, it's the more complete solo rule set, but I will point out things that are new in this in case you only have the base game. Because then you're going to be looking at your rules and confused. So if you have the X-Men rule book, use that one. If you have only have the original, I'll call out what's different. So first up, same between this is the setup. The first part of the setup is the same between both. Choose 3 heroes, shuffle their decks together to create the hero deck. The different card backs do not affect the game. The player can use this information to their advantage. So obviously, lots of games that need things to be randomized go to great lengths to make sure different cards, I'm thinking like Dune Imperium, you all have your starting cards, but then you also have all of the card market stuff. Some of them from the main deck, some of them from those individual piles. They all have the same card backs because companies have to assume there are going to be players, largely like myself, who don't use card sleeves. And without card sleeves, the cards need to be ostensibly the same on one side because you need to not know what's underneath it. In this game, that's not true. The backs of the cards are wonderfully adorned with the adorable art of the different characters. And like it says, you can use that to your advantage. So that you can know whose card is coming up. You're going to shuffle together, I think there's 12, 13, something like that, cards in each deck. And you have your hand of whatever you've drawn with the first 5, but then you know what's coming up next. So it's just kind of like a not perfect knowledge of the future, but a general idea. Next up, if you wish to do so, you may only add challenges that support single-player games. The formatting is slightly different. So I was like, wait, why don't they look the same? So yeah, this is where now I don't have everything, and I didn't go at all in on the multiverse stuff. So this is just going to have to be when you're playing it, kind of looking at the rule set for these different challenges and saying, is this worth it? And is it possible? So the obvious ones that are impossible, I would say the Tales of Asgard. Now I'm going to hold it up for my green screen, so these are probably going to be a little bit messed up. Tales of Asgard, which is the Thor, the expansion, has a trader challenge. Not going to be much fun. In fact, it's going to be impossible for you to play that game, since the trader challenge requires, the trader to be able to do things on their own, which you can't. So don't do it. It's not possible. Next up, again, this one's going to come up real hot on the green screen. Sinister Six, which is fantastic. One of the ones, just like Thor, actually all of these but Guardians of the Galaxy I bought on the second go around when it was X-Men Kickstarter, because I missed them the first time. So Sinister Six is doable as a solo mode, but it's just challenging because you have one hand, which we'll get to in a second. Actually, you know what? No, we're going to come back to this when I can explain why it would be challenging. The Guardians of the Galaxy with the Plan B challenge totally works. It provides 3 mission cards to replace the original ones. So save civilians, beat up thugs, and complete missions. It just makes you do more of them, which is originally just like, well, that kind of sucks. But the added bonus of if you complete all 3 of these missions in the normal game, you get to draw a card for each hero. In Plan B, you just win. So that's totally doable solo. Black Panther is also totally doable in solo. The Endangered Locations expansion. So each character is going to have like a token that is associated, a paired token with them and one of the locations. And whenever a civilian or a thug can't be placed to that location, they're going to take damage on theirs because it's like near and dear to their heart. Now that is going to be super challenging, and I'll come back to that at the same time when I come back to Sinister Six, but it is theoretically doable. All right, this one's going to be real messed up. There's the Into the Spider-Verse. This one is also doable, though I don't know that you're necessarily going to be making a better game with this. It's just going to be adding like a few more things to keep track of. Because to me, one of the benefits and elements of beauty of this game is that it goes so quick. The games are super fast, and I can either just do another round against the same villain, maybe with increased difficulty, or I can switch something out. But if you want, you can do the Secret Identity Challenge, which essentially just makes it a little bit trickier when you can go, whole hog into like taking out a villain, because a reporter is going to, expose you and your secret identity, and then it's going to be painful. You have to like kind of essentially burn a turn of trying to hide from the news reporters or something. So doable, but mileage may vary. And last of my expansions, I didn't get the Thanos or the, Infinity Gauntlet. There it is. I didn't get that one, though from what I know of it, that one should totally be soloable. The blue team, which is blue and I think gold team, where it allows you to have the 2 cooperative teams of like 3 heroes each that are trying to out-hero each other. Again, I suppose that one, like, I think you can just put in the no column, because why would you do that? I suppose you could if you wanted to see it. But anyways, so that bullet is, I didn't mean to go through in detail, but I did. So if you have any other expansions that I didn't talk about there, you just need to look through the rules and say, does this make sense? And I'll come back to those 2 that kind of don't, and why, because that might influence your choice on something else. Third bullet under setup. During setup, draw 5 cards into your hand instead of 3. And in the X-Men version, it says making sure any starting card or starting hand cards are in your hand. Now, this is fine that it's not in the core game, because you don't have any of those things. In X-Men, some of the mutant heroes have cards that they guarantee have in their opening hand. So again, if you have just the core rulebook, you don't have those mutants, so you don't need to worry about it. And then last but not least, set the villain's health at the 3 heroes level. Now, this is only in the X-Men one. Again, I think it's just one of those FAQs they just decided to implement into the rules itself. I think it makes sense. Why? You have 3 heroes, even though they're sharing a hand, but it's important just to say it. So people are like, what level should I put it at? So yeah, it's the 3 hero level for their health points, and then you're good to go. And then we get to special rules. So in the original game, there were 5 of these, and in the X-Men one, there are 13. No, 10. Nailed it. And so again, I'll call out which ones are in both, because I think the extra ones, these ones actually add clarity. The one about the starting hand cards, didn't need to be there. So first up is in both of them, turns are resolved in the usual sequence with you playing every hero turn. So this is important because you're essentially going to be, even though play is just coming to you as the solo player, you are going through the whole player sequence for every hero that you play. So on the back of both of the rule books, or whichever one you have, it has the rules summary for the villain and the hero turn. You are going to go through this whole thing for each hero. And remember, at the beginning of the game, 3 heroes go between every villain master card. So you personally are going to go through this 3 times and they could be different, they could be the same heroes. So you're going to draw a card, play a card, resolve the actions, and then location effects. End of turn refers to the hero turn, not like the player turn or something. So the whole kit and caboodle every time a hero does something. Next up is in both rules as well. Each turn, you may play the card of any hero in your hand, even if it's the same hero as the last card played. You always benefit, as usual, from the symbols on the previously played card, but not from their special effect, even if it's the same hero. So these are the exact same rules in both rule books, and this is kind of the crux of this Xavier or S.H.I.E.L.D. solo mode. That you can, it's totally up to you. If you have a hand of only one hero, you can just hat trick it and do 3 turns in a row of just that hero. To maybe those are exactly the actions you need. but also maybe you want to get those out, some of those out, so you can get other cards into your hand. Now remember, you're drawing at the top of your turn, so you might draw into a different hero, but you do not have to feel constrained to rotate around. You already have constraints with this system, which we'll get to. So kind of like the benefit is being more flexible in terms of, oh, this would be the perfect hero to go. You don't need to wait for your turn. You can just do it. Next up, the hero whose card you played is considered the active hero of that turn. This is also in both rules. So again, this is the same thing with that first bullet. Even though it's me just playing the hero turn, the big meta turn, you're thinking of turns by hero individually. And so that individual hero is the active player, or active hero rather. Any effect that refers to another player refers to you. So if another player is to draw a card, another player can move their hero, that is you. You are the other player in that regards, because the game is just sort of short-circuiting that like connection between like hero and player, because you're the same one for all of them. This one is a new one that does not exist in the original rulebook. Any effect that refers to you refers to the specific hero in question, except when concerning your tokens or your hand cards, which belong to the player. So tokens and hand cards, the 5 you start with and any tokens you collect, those can be used by any hero. And that's another one of the benefits. So just like super flexibility in this game mode. There aren't any tokens that are like, oh man, if only I had that token from you. Now that means there are some heroes that have abilities that are just going to be nerfed. Anything that allows a player to trade a token. Not one that gives a token to another player, because you'll benefit from that, but like giving a token, like one that you have to give to someone else, essentially does nothing in this play mode. So if you have a character with that, that's a dead card. So anything, referring to you is just talking to that hero, because in the rules, which were, ostensibly written for not this mode, they were just like, well, we're just going to refer to you need to do this thing because it's one hero, one player, that connection we talked about before, which is not true here. So again, being whoever is the active hero, that's kind of important. And if you want to, in the like chain of events, that timeline, maybe like raise the card up, or it's just the one that's the most rightmost card. That's the active hero. So if anything talks about them, that's the only one it affects. All right, next up kind of is just like doubling down on something we just talked about. This is only in the X-Men one. Action tokens in your possession can be used by any hero. So it just kind of hinted at that, of like that tokens and cards belong to the player, and the player is the like puppeteer of everything. But it just makes sure it is in black and white. Next up, also only in the X-Men one, if the third mission is complete, you draw 3 cards, 1 for each hero. This is kind of huge. And this is one of the ones that I never ran up against, but it's exactly in that category of when you're playing the original one, it doesn't mention that. You could kind of look at it, make a case for it both ways. But I think the stronger case to be made is 3 heroes are working towards defeating or completing 3 missions, so each one of those should get a card, especially because the next thing we're about to talk about. So when taking damage, you may discard any card from your hand, even if it doesn't belong to the hero that took damage. If multiple heroes take damage at once, discard 1 card per damage. Now, this also wasn't in the original one, and it's kind of a big one. So we talked about the liability of this mode. This is it. You only have 5 cards in your hand, and even though normally we just have 3 cards in our hand as multiplayer players, even in a 2-player game, that would net 6 cards between you. 1 more for those math whizzes at home than this mode. However, we're playing 3-player mode. So that would normally have 9 cards between the 3 heroes, and we only have 5. Now, I think the upside at least weighs out this downside, if not sometimes is, it's more than enough to say that any hero can go at any time, and, tokens are collectively shared, and health is collectively shared. Because there are some situations where it's just kind of a bummer that one player happened to suffer the brunt of a couple BAM effects or whatever, and suddenly they're already KO'd. In this one, that's less likely to happen because you absorb it into your pool of health. However, one downside, like a shadow debuff to the player in this mode, is that all those locations that say you may draw a card if you're at 1 or 2 cards, the threshold is much higher to get to that point. In the multiplayer mode, having 2 cards in your hand or even 1 card in your hand, there's a decent chance you're going to get to that spot, at which point you can just make your way over to that location and get some health back. In this mode, if you are down to 1 or 2 cards in your hand, you're about to lose the game. More than likely. That location probably isn't going to help. It might, and if it does, then that's an awesome story to tell, but it probably won't. Yeah, no matter who's taking the damage, you just have to pitch a card to the bottom of your deck. It doesn't matter if it matches. And then that other part, which is absolutely brutal, if you clumped up your heroes to do a bunch of damage and then that villain did damage to all heroes at the site, let's say all 3 of them were there, you have to discard 3 cards. You can't be like, well, it's me, the player. I'm just discard, because we're back to that. It's talking about each individual hero. All heroes at that site have to take 1 damage. So, not fun. Next up, this is in both of them, though it is boldified in the original, and in the X-Men one, they said, maybe we don't need this bold. If you are ever KO'd, you immediately lose. So being knocked out in the game is where you don't have any cards in your hand. You have discarded, because damage is just putting a card at the bottom of your deck. So you're going to see it again. It's just costing you the access to that card and the convenience of having, another card to choose from on your turn. And if you ever have none of them, you just go boop and you tip your guy over, and then at your turn, you stand him back up and you draw up to 3. But in this, you do not do that. You just lose. However, what is boldified in the X-Men one is something that wasn't in the original difficulty setting. You can make the game easier by allowing 1 or 2 extra KOs before defeat. When KO'd, lay down all the hero game pieces and resolve a single villain BAM. At the start of your next turn, place all the heroes back upright. During the draw card step, draw up to 6 cards from your deck. So normally, when you get knocked out, the villain gets 1 BAM effect as an extra bonus. They did the thing, being evil, they beat up enough on the hero to knock him out, and now they get to do their BAM effect, which is never a good thing. And in this case, they get to do that once. This one they don't get to do 3 times, 1 for each hero, just once for knocking out the team, because even though they had to churn through a larger hand size, it is only 1 hand. So they do that, and you knock all your guys down, which is important because when you are down, you are immune to damage. So it doesn't matter if the villain comes around and then does 2 damage to a hero there. You are essentially there only as a placeholder. You're hidden in somebody's back room, drinking vitamin water or something. And then when you stand back up and you draw your hand back, now you're fully back into the game. So aside from that, what's not in the rules is how you win the game and lose the game is the exact same. So you either win the game because you defeat the villain, or the plan B challenge or whatever, and you lose the game if the villain runs out of cards or if you run out of cards, which would be you ran out of time or you ran out of vigor to complete the task. So with that, let's go back to a couple of these a couple of these expansions that I kind of said, I don't know if this is necessarily the best use for solo. So Black Panther, mechanically, this one should work just fine. You put a token on 3 different locations, and each of your heroes gets one of them. However, just the fact that this is just another consistent way of taking damage, I mean, it's gonna force you to do what it mechanically wants you to do, which is put extra emphasis onto keeping those locations cleared off. That said, there's a higher ceiling to the pain associated with getting KO'd in this, i.e. losing the game, as opposed to just oh man, we really need to work on keeping that location clear because Black Panther keeps getting knocked out from damage from it. Even if it's just one problematic location and that keeps drawing down your hand, and then the normal damage allocation from the game is enough to just knock you out, that's a huge, kind of bummer. So this is workable. It totally should work. It's just going to make a really challenging, maybe borderline frustrating game. You be the judge. Sinister Six is kind of in that same vein. So you have to, and maybe, I was kind of reading the, to be honest, the S.H.I.E.L.D. solo mode when I first played Sinister Six, when I got my X-Men stuff, and I was like, all right, time to finally play this, and it should work just fine with solo mode, which kind of does. But the problem is there are some of these villains like Craven, there it is, and Electro, who are pretty super focused on doing damage to you, as specifically seeking out one hero or just dealing damage to all heroes at a site. And as we talked about, that can real quick be problematic in terms of losing your whole hand. So that said, when I played Sinister Six solo, I wouldn't say rocked, because I did a decent amount of damage, and I worked towards the being able to defeat all of the Sinister Six. I think I got 3 of them, if I remember correctly. But it was just really, anytime you take damage, at first you're like, okay, fine, I have 5 cards in my hand. Now I'm down to 4. Ooh. But then you realize that's kind of a big deal. If this is gone, it's game over. And again, like I said, you don't get access to those heal powers from the locations until it's kind of 11th hour, it's do or die time. So there was, once I kind of lost a critical mass of cards, and then at that point the added detriment is you don't really have a choice of what you're going to do. It's well, I have 1 card in my hand. I'm drawing a second card, but my options are super limited. But the bigger issue obviously is you only have 1 card. So when you inevitably get low, or maybe even get KO'd, the original rules said, boom, solo mode, over. Which in the Xavier solo mode, they have that other part about the difficulty, which I'm interested to try now. And I don't know how I would do it. I don't know if I would say go into it with a certain number of respawns, or go into it and then say, well, I'm going to play it and I'm going to keep track of how many respawns I get, and then maybe in the BG stats post for the game, I would write how many respawns it took. I don't really know, but what I do know is that while that's not a hard no, the Tales of Asgard one, given the fact that getting KO'd once was game over originally, it seemed like a hard no until I was oh, Xavier mode isn't a different solo mode, which is why I didn't read the rules. It's well, I know how to play the original one, so I'm just going to dive right into it, and I'll look at this later. They're the same thing. It's just a different name, and Xavier Solo Mode has more of those FAQs and that difficulty setting, which should unlock the return of the Sinister Six. We'll have to see. But anyways, that is, oh, right. Hold on. I'm like dancing around this version. So the reason this is an issue, because normally getting KO'd, like, again, you get knocked over, the BAM effect, you draw back up and you keep playing. The reason this is an issue is in the Sinister Six rules, heroes lose if villains must draw a master plan card, but their deck is empty, so the normal way. They also lose if any hero starts their turn with no cards, both in their deck and in their hand. Oh. And this is why I have this segment. Never mind. So this is the goal of this is for me to be the cow catcher, to go across through all of these rules, which for some games, and honestly, this is a pretty easy game. This video is way longer than it would take a normal like hobby board gamer to read through the Xavier Solo rules and probably to grok it. But I also know that there are some people who are just like, I don't know how to do that. I've only played a multiplayer. I don't feel like learning. And hopefully, maybe for them, they can throw this on in the background and it'll help them out. There are, however, like solo games that I love that are not this easy. And so for those, it'll be a little bit more heavy lifting on my part. But again, even in a simple game like this, there is something, this is what I love about being a teacher in the music world, is that I can make the mistakes and I can learn from them so I can teach better. And same thing here on board games. So that is, again, way longer than it needs to be. But my teach through of the solo section of Marvel United. Again, core rules or X-Men version, whatever you're playing, you can do it solo. And it's a super fun way to play it because it's fast. Solo mode requires you to play with 3, so you have a good mix of heroes. You get to see kind of the different character traits of all 3 of them. And you get to play more Marvel United, which is awesome because it's a great game. So with that, until next time, I hope you have a great time playing games. Thanks for taking a pause with Give Pause, and I'll see you in the next video.